Hello, I'm Rosalind Esche of dearreader.blog. Welcome to our crime scene podcast, which focuses on crime fiction writers. Today, I'm in conversation with Emily Winslow, author of compelling psychological crime novels written from multiple points of view. We met up in the Botanic Gardens in Cambridge, and I started by asking Emily if she defines herself as a crime writer or as a psychological novelist who happens to write about crime.
I think of myself as a crime writer, but with the very broadest definition of crime. So I'm very happy to have my books always be about figuring something out. I'm very happy for them to always involve extreme situations like dealing with a murder. So in that sense, they are crime, but they won't necessarily always follow the same formula or standard or subgenre expectation.
Some might think that writing, and indeed reading crime fiction, indicates an unhealthy attraction to the dark side of the human psyche. But is it actually a healthy way of exploring fears and dangers in a safe place?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've struggled with this myself when I was younger, and I used to spend a lot of time in the true crime section of the library. And I thought, what does this say about me? That this is my entertainment? Like, is that,
I wonder that too.
am I a sadist or something? What's going on here? And I've thought about it, and I've come to the conclusion that it's perfectly fine, and that when I spend time reading about it or writing about it, it's not, the focus isn't on the crimes. The focus is on coping with the crimes, responding to the crimes, regrouping and rebuilding after something immense and world-changing has happened in somebody's life.
Yes.
And if you look at most crime novels, they don't lovingly detail the violence chapter after chapter. Something horrible has happened, and then you see people trying to cope and recover afterward and try to make something out of it and try to do the best they can to fix what's fixable.
Yes.
So I think it's extremely healthy.
That's good to hear, because I worry sometimes. I find that interesting in your books, that is very much the focus, in a really distinctive way, more than others I've read, actually, that you are interested in the puzzle and the crime, but you're even more interested in people coping with it and the sort of psychological ramifications, and that's really compelling.
Well, for me, I know that a lot of times, crime is set up with you see a big priority at the beginning with giving a lot of different characters motive. That's one, standard way to organize a crime novel, and very entertaining. And you realize, oh, this person would get money, this person would get freedom, and
yes.
But for me, a motive is not enough, because to kill somebody is such a psychologically horrifying thing to do. And so for me, it's not enough to say this person would benefit from their death.
Right.
It's who would benefit from their death and could actually bring themselves to do it.
What's the tipping point?
And exactly. And then also, how does it change them afterward now that they've done it?
Yes.
And so all of that psychology is really important to me. Everything, motive is step one, but then there are many steps thereafter to get to who committed the crime.
Because there will be people who have a motive, but they wouldn't actually step over that line.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're interested in I like the relationships between the police as well, and their partnerships.
Oh, thank you.
I love that. That's interesting too, because you get into their minds and their lives as well in a really interesting way. I think.
That really surprised me. When I was writing the first novel, I was not planning for it to be a series.
Right.
And that's why you can see the detective is an important character, but he's not the central character.
Yes.
And his partner, Chloe, who becomes very, very important starting with book 2, was just sort of a side character at that point. And I named her Chloe Froman, and Froman is a name I made up as far as I can tell.
Right.
And I remember when she became important in book 2, I was like, I might have given her a more recognizable name if I had realized I would be using her over and over again. But yes, I like them very much.
I like them. And I really like Morris too. He's really interesting. He's a great character.
And his relationship with his brother, that delights me.
Yeah. Okay. So you said in an article for Crime Reads in 2018 that to read or write crime fiction is to practice hopefulness. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, that's very similar to what we were just saying about it's about coping and recovering and about building something new when the thing you thought was going to be your future has been destroyed and taken away. And for me personally, the fact that I spend so much of my life, so much of my reading and my writing sort of rehearsing that, something terrible happens, that pattern, that's the word I'm looking for, that pattern of something terrible happens, and then you deal with it and you make something new. And just living that over and over again in my mind has just been so helpful to me personally that when I experience struggle in my own life, to just realize, okay, this is the struggle. This is chapter 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to start coping, and then something new that I don't know what it is going to come out of this. And so I just think that reading and writing this stuff is good practice for healthy psychology in your own life.
That's really interesting. So you think it's healthy that we read and write it? Mm-hmm. There's nothing ghoulish about it, and it's also therapeutic in a way.
Absolutely,
for our own problems and difficulties.
Yeah, well, it's just, to my mind, it's a good attitude to take. This is going to go somewhere. It's not the end of the world.
And is it a sort of safe place to rehearse things that might never happen to you, but you're afraid of them and it helps you cope? I feel that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so many of our fears will absolutely never come to pass.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting to think about, but what if they did? What could be done in the wake of that? And it's just reassuring to know, okay, there are things that I can do, things that happen after.
Yeah, or even would I cope, or would I know what to... But also what you were just saying, could I even be that person who does a terrible thing? So you're also looking at your own potential, aren't you, for the darkness and whether you could kill someone, if you were pushed enough. That's something you sort of can explore a little bit, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, one of the things that as you know, all my books have multiple first-person narrators, and so we have the detective point of view, and we sometimes have victim points of view, and we sometimes have murderer points of view, or witnesses and bystanders who are also terribly, terribly affected by being sucked into horrible things. And it is interesting that it takes all of them to tell the story. Which is where the title of the first book comes from, The Whole World. No one character has the whole story. You need all of them to understand the whole thing.
Yes. You use multiple narrators in your books with different points of view. Are you particularly interested in narrative unreliability?
I'm interested in narrative unreliability because it represents normal human narrative unreliability.
Yeah.
That, just like I just said about The Whole World, none of us have the whole story about anything. Yeah. We're each just one voice adding to the whole. So for me, it's not just something that I like in book characters. It's something, it's a personal philosophy that's deeply important to me. And my books are sometimes criticized for it being difficult to tell who the main character is. And I understand that can be a flaw from a literary perspective, but for me, it's completely deliberate.
Yeah.
Because my whole point is there is no main character. Yeah. We're all just coming in and out. The story is central, and we're all coming in and out of it as we do. But nobody gets to be the star of any story.
No. But that's what makes your books different, isn't it? Really different.
I guess. And if people like it or not is up to them.
I think it's really compelling doing it that way. And it's even like in just your regular family life, in siblings.
Yeah.
Each person's memories of childhood are completely different.
Absolutely.
And they can each be right, but they're not the same. And
absolutely.
They won't recognize your memories.
Memory is one of my favorite themes in all the world, and how, memory changes over time. Different memories belong to different people, and yet they're all looking at the same thing. No, memory is I think one of the most fascinating human things to think about.
I read that you work for Games Magazine as a creator of complex logical puzzles. So is that side useful? Is doing that useful for creating the puzzles in your stories, or is it a different kind of process? Or are you just drawn to puzzles?
So puzzles are deeply profound to me in a lot of ways.
Okay.
First of all, I grew up with my dad was a lawyer, and then when I was around 7, he quit being a lawyer to invent board games and puzzles in the basement.
How unusual.
And it was amazing. And so, and his work, so me and all my friends, we kind of grew up hanging out in my dad's workshop and using all his tools and things like that.
So you were his guinea pigs?
Oh, yes. Well, we were his game testers. It was amazing. And so that grew up to be, that was a very important part of my growing up. And so puzzles came very naturally to me. Philosophically, what I love about puzzles is you start out with something that superficially seems impossible. And I mean, even a crossword puzzle looks to me that way. Like I look at it and I say, there is no word that can fit here. Do you know what I mean? It says there's a 5-letter word. I know H is the second letter, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just looking at going, there is no possible word. Eventually, when I figure it out, I get that incredible aha moment going from this was impossible to actually, if I change myself and my assumptions, it all becomes clear. And philosophically, that's just how I like to approach life, that if I could just look at things the right way, they will make sense to me, even when they don't make sense. So for me, all the emotional psychology of a crime novel is sort of on a par with the puzzle psychology, because why are you looking at, if you have to change the way you look at it to see the real answer. So that's the way puzzles are in everything for me.
That's really interesting. I mean, when Alison did our lockdown reading project, I don't know if you looked at the blog, but that's how we started. The blog just grew out of the lockdown and asking people how it affected their ability to read, their concentration, their motivation, so on. And she did that for us. And she recommended this book by Winslow called The Science of Storytelling. I guess as opposed to the art. And I've started reading it. It's fascinating. And he talks about puzzle solving as being neurologically just hardwired into us. And so he quotes scientific experiments by a guy called Lowenstein, I think, who gets volunteers and sort of tests their reactions to things. And apparently the human brain is just hardwired to desperately want to solve a puzzle put in front of them. And
you want to make sense of it.
And he was saying that the key to storytelling, and particularly obviously detective and crime storytelling, but any storytelling, some of the factors are things like information gaps and unexpected change. So he was saying a detective story will start with unexpected change. In other words, something happens. And then there are gaps in the information.
And everybody wants to fill it in.
And people are completely desperate to fill them in.
Oh, that's lovely.
And these experiments prove that people went on and on and on trying to solve problems, even when, they could just ask, but they had to finish, So this puzzle solving is really fundamental to human psychology, it seems.
I love that, and I agree with it 100%. And now I want to read that book.
So do you ever feel constrained by the conventions of crime fiction? Or can working within a formulaic framework be creatively liberating?
I need the constraints of crime fiction to be an engine for my plot. Because without it, I'll just wander around commenting on, this relationship or that character or this interesting observation of setting. And those are the things that delight me and excite me.
So you need reining in, do you?
Yes, without the engine of plot, they wouldn't all be linked, and there wouldn't be a reason to sort of charge through and encounter all of the things that I find interesting. So I absolutely need it.
To pull it together.
Or all the little things I find interesting would just be disconnected and scattered on the table.
So that kind of pulls them together, gives them a shape.
Absolutely.
Well, that's really interesting. So it kind of frees you up in a way, but it keeps you under control. Would you agree with Ian Rankin, who said he discovered that everything you wanted to say about the world could be said in a crime novel?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. I mean, I think part of it depends on what people think of when they say crime novel. If somebody is very rigid in saying, a crime novel is a Sherlock Holmes story and that's it, then obviously there would be some things you couldn't explore through that character or that format, however wonderful it is, and it is wonderful.
And it is,
but if you just have a broad idea about crime, then yes, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. Crime to me is just something serious and terrible happened, and humans react.
Yes.
And that's very broadly applicable.
Yes. I think when he first started, I'm sure I heard him in an interview saying that he hadn't expected to find his books being put in the crime section in bookshops. And I think he even tells a story where he went in and saw his book there and moved it, took it out and put it somewhere else, and then it went back. And then he suddenly thought, okay, so I write crime. And that's when he thought about it and thought,
yes,
well, it just happens to be the vehicle for what he wants to say.
I asked Emily how her distinctive style of using multiple narrators developed.
So the part with the narrators, I had originally trained as an actor, which I loved.
That. Yeah.
And one of the things that I found fascinating as an actor was that when you play one character, it's your responsibility to defend that character's corner. Mm-hmm. And the other actors are defending their characters, and all of that works together, that you don't need to try to be the director. You don't need to try to do anybody else's part. You just do your part, and that helps them do their part, because then they have something to play off of.
Right.
So it was very natural to me to try first person first, because I like stepping into a character and being limited to what they can see, because to me that opens up so much depth, because the limitations themselves tell you about this character. So it was natural that I did that. And then when I got to page 60, I ran into something that I wanted the reader to know that this character would not be able to tell them. Right. And so I realized I would have to change to another character at this point. And because I like symmetry for that book, I decided, well, I guess I'll have 5 narrators then, because it's a 300-page book. And after each 60 pages, I will change. And that was a decision made there, and it just made me so happy to be able to explore so many different voices, so I have continued to do that.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this 2-part interview with Emily Winslow.